everyone, I'm Miss Archer and welcome to the Hinchley Wood School revision series on Jekyll and Hyde. Today we are going to be doing chapter 8, The Last Night. Ooh, thunder crackling and all dark foreboding stuff. It's very fitting. I love this chapter. It's so action-packed, it is so foreboding, and it is the last chapter where we have that brilliant third-person narrative following Mr. Utterson, and then after this we don't see Utterson again, which saddens me a bit because he is my favourite character. I literally just love him so much. Which brings me on to a big think question for you all. Why does Stevenson choose for us to not hear from or about Utterson in and after chapters 9 and 10? Why choose to end the novella with Jekyll's voice? And why do we not get to see Utterson's reaction to the letters that he's just read? What's the purpose of that? Would it be better to have it, or is it fine just the way it is? So, you know, you could always comment below what you think. Hashtag audience participation is very fun. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? So today's video is going to include a summary of the chapter, followed by an overview of Mr. Hyde in chapter 8, analysing some key quotes. And we're going to do the same, but for the themes of the Gothic and violence. And then we're going to finish with an analysis of an extract, focusing again on that theme of violence. So let's take it away. The following is a clip from my Jekyll and Hyde entire plot summary video. Enjoy.
Chapter 8, The Last Night. It's very foreboding. Time goes by and Mr. Poole shows up and says, "Oh, you need to come to Jekyll's house right now because he suspects foul play." What I don't understand is why Poole gets Utterson involved instead of, oh, I don't know, a policeman? It perplexes me, but this wouldn't aid the plot, so logic goes out the window again, I guess. They get to the house, and Poole calls out to Jekyll, who is inside his lab, but the voice that replies sounds nothing like him. Poole says he heard Jekyll cry out 8 days ago, and that voice has been in the room ever since. Poole also says that the voice in the lab asks him to go out and keep looking for this one specific ingredient, but he can never get one that is pure, so he's just going around in circles with this. Utterson wonders if Jekyll just has some strange disease that changes him, but worryingly, Poole says the man looks similar to Mr. Hyde. They believe Hyde murdered Jekyll and for some strange reason has stayed in the lab with the dead body ever since. When Utterson is certain he hears Hyde's voice, both men decide to break down the lab door with an axe and a poker and find a dead Mr. Hyde on the floor, who is wearing Dr. Jekyll's clothes. They look for Jekyll's body, but cannot find it anywhere. Confusion. They also find a huge mirror, which has no place or purpose in a lab. Utterson then finds 3 documents. Number 1, a new will which leaves Jekyll's assets to Utterson. Number 2, a note which has been written that day which tells Utterson to go home and read the letter he received from Lanyon. And document 3, a sealed envelope.
Now let's look at our focus character for this chapter. It is, of course, Mr. Poole, you know, such a handsome, brave, heroic man, beloved by all. The words can't describe how important his character is and how much we can say. I'm joking, we're doing Hyde, obviously we're doing Hyde, no one would ever do Poole. There's not much to say. But Poole has a lot to say about Hyde, as presented on the screen around me now. As you can see, I've highlighted things in colour for a reason. So let's start by looking at this very verdant green around the screen. They are all examples of animalistic imagery, or if you want to be super fancy, you can say zoomorphism, which is basically personification except the opposite. So personification is where we give animals and objects human qualities. Zoomorphism is where we give humans and objects animal qualities. So you see how it works. So around the screen we've got plenty here. Cry out like a rat, dismal screech of mere animal terror. He's digging, he gives a kind of cry, he's like a monkey. So we've got similes in there as well, but ultimately it all falls back to the image of an animal. And of course, it shows how primal and savage Hyde is, but we can make a contextual link here to Darwin's Origin of Species, which set about proving that mankind shared a common ancestor with apes. So therefore, what Stevenson is perhaps suggesting is that all humans have these primal instincts, but we choose whether or not we act on them. And Hyde is therefore this regressive form of human, regressive meaning backwards, essentially. And he is dangerous due to his impulsive and untamed nature, and that's what makes him so scary for the people who see him. We're now going to look at when Paul says, if that was my master, why had he a mask upon his face? Now, a mask, of course, is a symbol of secrecy, but on top of that, it works as that play on words of the characteronym Hyde, meaning to hide. You know, he doesn't want to be found, and to that end he disassociates himself and hides himself from basic human society. In this quote, we also have a repeated use of question marks, which shows the confusion and the chaos and the panic that Hyde causes. And it also, because of the nature of a question mark, reinforces the mystery of Hyde. Next, we're going to look at these two bottom quotes. As you can see in pink, we've got similes, and they're very, very similar in their effects. The hair stood upon my head like quills, and down my spine like ice. These are extreme, like physical reactions, but they are showing the emotional reaction that Paul and others have to Hyde, and the terror that he causes manifests itself so deeply. Then on top of that, Paul finishes off by saying, I give you my Bible word, it was Mr. Hyde. So categorical proof there that the Kardashians did not invent the whole Bible thing. No, it was Paul from Jekyll and Hyde. Go him. But be more serious. I give you my Bible word. It's interesting. Utterson and Paul, when talking about Hyde, feel this need to say God or Bible or any other kind of religious imagery. And it kind of hints that when confronting Hyde, they need salvation of the highest form. They need saving of a godly kind, which in turn tells us how sinful and debased and how devilish Hyde is. We're going to look at some more quotes because why not? You can never have enough. Linking back to the animalistic imagery used to describe Hyde, he is also constantly referred to by the dehumanizing pronoun it, and it just reinforces the idea of him being subhuman and regressive in his behaviours and manners and appearance and just about everything, really. We then have, in the quote down here, Paul says, Mr. Hyde, why, yes, I think it was. Now, notice the punctuation. It's a question mark, and then a dash, and then 2 commas, and then an exclamation mark. Naturally saying it, you take a lot of pauses. The speech is broken up. So we would say that this is a fractured and chaotic use of punctuation. And it shows that immediate fear and discomfort he feels when he finally has to talk about Hyde and say his name. Always interesting with characters like this. Of course, we know Hyde dies in this chapter because Jekyll commits suicide and therefore kills them both. And these are Hyde's last words. Utterson, for God's sake, have mercy. Very interesting choice of last words. Now, you can interpret this in one of 2 ways. Either it's blasphemy, you know, saying, oh, for God's sake, that's very anti-religious, that fits the Hyde character. Okay, we get that. I'm not so sure it is that, though. I'm more convinced that it is a more genuine use of the term for God's sake. So it kind of seems like some sort of last-ditch effort for any kind of salvation. And also, it's very un-Hyde-like, these last few words. So, you know, he asks Utterson to have mercy. He's essentially begging for his life. And that's not the kind of proud and uppity nature of Hyde that we know. You know, pride is one of the sins, and he's being the opposite of that right now. It doesn't quite make sense. So perhaps really what's happening here is that there is almost this blending of the Jekyll and Hyde in these last moments. The duality is not as black and white as we first imagine it to be. Really, it has these shades of grey, and Jekyll has Hyde qualities and Hyde can have Jekyll qualities as well. And then lastly, we have this quote: "There lay the body of a man sorely contorted and twitching." These verbs, contorted and twitching, they show a very unpleasant death, perhaps befitting Hyde. Perhaps we as a reader are like, yeah, he deserves that. And maybe that's what Jekyll wants too. And then to finish off the quote, Utterson knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer. Utterson cannot bring himself to say suicide. Now, the reason for this, another contextual link, suicide is a taboo subject of the Victorian era. And it stems from the fact that those who committed suicide were seen as very anti-Christian. And I know in Tudor times, they would have been denied a proper burial. I'm not entirely sure if this was still happening in the Victorian era. I'm like 80% sure it still was. I'm going to have to fact check that, sorry. Now, this in turn creates a very juxtaposing last act for Jekyll. On the one hand, he has committed suicide, very sinful. On the other hand, he has done the ultimate sacrifice, I would say, in killing himself so that he can kill Hyde and therefore stop any further harm that Hyde may continue to do to others. There is a duality to this final act in the same way that there is a duality to these two characters and the whole of the human psyche. Now we're going to look at violence and the Gothic as a theme. So what is the Gothic, I hear you cry? We provide the answers up here. The term Gothic fiction refers to the style of writing that is characterised by elements of fear, horror, death, gloom, as well as romantic elements, romantic with a capital R, such as nature, individuality, and very high emotion. These emotions can include fear and suspense. So I've chosen 6 quotes here that go very nicely with that Gothic and also with violence at the same time. So in the pink, as you can see, we're looking at these 3 quotes together. In the pink, we have pathetic fallacy, so the weather showing the mood, to connote an uncomfortable and dangerous atmosphere because the wind tossed the candlelight to and fro. There is wind and dust, which causes the trees to lash, and there is biting weather. So lashing and biting coupled with that pathetic fallacy make it very, very kind of violent and dangerous in its atmosphere. The wind is also personified in that first quote and threatens to put out Paul and Utterson's only source of light in the darkness, which intensifies the fear. With the quotes sort of down here now, there are consistent references to danger in general, you know, foul play being sort of murder. He is frightened. The word peril is used. There is an axe, very dangerous. No health and safety precautions here. And we're constantly reminded of the danger that Paul and Utterson are putting themselves in. It cements them as sort of this heroic man of action, which is a character stereotype of the Gothic fiction. It goes very well with the whole damsel in distress at the same time. Of course, there is no damsel here. There is also, in the second quote, a use of plosive alliteration. You and I are about to place ourselves in a position of some peril. And I think that mimics the sound of Utterson stumbling over his words and demonstrates his fear over what they are about to do. There is also a semantic field of violence and chaos through words like crashed, bounded, blow, fell, when they are breaking that door down, and again solidifies them as these heroic men of action, whilst also showing the sheer force needed to take on a dangerous man like Hyde. It will be no easy task, apart from when it is, because they walk in and he's already dying. Convenient. Lastly, this is our key extract for today. We're going to pretend like this is the thing we have in the exam. Let's say the question we have is, how does Stevenson present violence in Jekyll and Hyde? Obviously, the key word is violence. You would need to think about what moments in the text are the most violent, and at its heart, what is Stevenson saying about violence in general? What is his message about it? This is especially important for those of you who really want to go for those higher grades. You need something we call a thesis statement in your introduction, where you sort of lay down what was the writer's message and how do they show it through key plot points in the text. And we should use the extract as a springboard. Immediately when I think of this, there is one other key violent moment in the text, and that is the murder of Sir Danvers Carew, which I would say is even more violent than this moment here. And there's a clear reason why. Danvers Carew is murdered by Hyde, and this moment the violence comes from two respectable gentlemen who are just trying to do the right thing. So this made me think of a thesis statement which we have in this lovely yellow box here. And I think the message could be that violence can be used as a means to an end, as long as the morals behind it and the reasons for doing it are intrinsically good. We feel a sense actually of admiration for Poole and Utterson in this scene, which we are going to analyse in detail by looking at the language. And in this scene, Poole and Utterson have had to subvert their respectable nature in favour of using brute force to tackle Hyde. This is very unlike the shock and repulsion we feel towards Hyde, who uses violence completely unprovoked and who uses it to such an extreme. The bones audibly shattered. I'm already remembering quotes like that, which are so visceral and aural and just So that would be my thesis. So now I need to pick out the quotes from this extract and what I would say about them. Now, to go for those top grades, you need to be finding the quotes that, one, back up the thesis statement you just gave, and two, ideally use some kind of language device. So going back to what I said earlier, that semantic field of violence and chaos establishes the violence from the get-go as the men break down the door, and it reinforces the heroic act that these men are doing. They're almost like knights in shining armour. I'm also going to couple this with the use of red baize door, which they are having to knock down. We can look at that colour symbolism of red, which connotes danger and the potential for violence waiting for them inside. From this, it almost justifies their violent actions. To me, especially as a modern reader, I think, yes, I think I completely understand what they're doing, and I'm happy that they're doing it because they are justified in terms of what they are fighting against. What helps even further to kind of increase the audience sympathy for these men, they're appalled by their own riot, and that verb appalled, to feel ashamed, to feel immense guilt for what they have done. It shows the value of remaining with this respectable Victorian gentleman to them, even in these extreme circumstances in which they're needed, to be honest. And so our sympathy for the men increases. Now, what I've not got on the screen is my quote from the wider text. And of course, I would use quotes from the murder of Sir Danvers Carew. So about him clubbing him to the earth, and we could make that link to cavemen, and we could make that link to Charles Darwin to get some extra context points there. We could talk about the bones audibly shattered to kind of compare the violence and how one is extremely more violent than the other. And then to sort of add a final point to this, we can take one more quote from the extract, which is of the death of Hyde, the body of a man sorely contorted and still twitching. It is a fittingly, I would say, violent death for a violent man. And the verbs suggest extreme discomfort. And in the same way that we, the reader, feel immense sympathy for Poole and Utterson and great admiration for them, we also feel this sense of justice for the way that Hyde has had to die. And that's all from me today. I'm wishing you goodbye. Shrek is wishing you goodbye as well, because, got to give the kids what they want. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye.